The Deepweb1 Profiles, presented by Jonathan N. Wakeling. Good morning, it's Jonathan N. Wakeling, aka Speak a Little French, aka Makanaka, aka Picasso 3, clocking in here from Big Tree, Harare. This beautiful summer's day. And I'm here to talk about the Deepweb1 profiles. That's Deepweb1. And there is a kind of collection of profiles that I've developed on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And I'd like to step you through those various profiles over the next few minutes, and we'll go from there. So the first profile is the Deepweb1 profile, and that's on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Each of the profiles has a profile on Twitter and Instagram and a Facebook page. So, what can we learn from a hellish 5 years on the internet? And more accurately, 4 years on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. That was when I first got a smartphone, and it enabled me to get access to Facebook after many years of attempting to, without a phone. Anyhow, Deepweb1, we talk about a kind of language and what it represents. And each of the profiles has a certain language associated with it. Deepweb1, we have C, C++, and Java computer programming languages. That's C, C++, and Java. And we talk about technology, computers, and the internet. So Deepweb1 is all about technology, computers, and the internet. And what we are trying to look at is how there's the surface of an onion, or the surface of the skin of an onion, or the skin of an orange. That the deep web, even though it's meant to be hidden from all of our sites, there's a deep web that forms the skin of the internet. And so, although the deep web is actually hidden, there's part of the deep web, an aspect of the deep web, that rides over the surface, almost like a film on the surface of your computer screen. If you can imagine a thin cellophane film on your computer screen, that is an aspect of the deep web that's not recognized, and we're trying to recognize it. And that is where we go for public media like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I've chosen the triad of major social media sites as an example. It doesn't mean anything more than that. You might go for Reddit, you might go for DeviantArt, it doesn't matter. You can set up the profiles on any system you want. And why I chose Facebook as a starting point is because the family was on Facebook. And so there was an incentive to join Facebook because other members of the household were also on Facebook. And so that was the encouragement that I needed to join the social media giant. So anyway, Deepweb1, we're looking at the whole collection of 13 profiles, 12 visible and 1 hidden. The Picasso 3 is hidden. The rest of them are visible on the Deepweb1 profiles. And I'll put the links on the video, so you can go through Twitter and reach the profiles via Twitter. So, what's next? Next we have the Canoe Zoo Cafe. And what we look at here is the Canoe Zoo Cafe, Libra balances the books, and Jonathan N. Wakeling, J. N. Wakeling. The Canoe Zoo Cafe, we look at British English, Libra balances the books, we look at American English, and Jonathan N. Wakeling, we look at Shona and Indabele. So if you're wondering why we're talking about Bigtree Harari in this situation, you'll get an insight through Jonathan, myself, Jonathan, into Shona and Indabele, which are the languages spoken in Zimbabwe apart from English. So in Zimbabwe, we speak Shona, Indabele, and English, 3 languages. And there are various dialects of each of those. But what we decided to do is just go through a formal process of recognizing that English, it's almost impossible to get through the metaphor of language without English on your side. And that's where it helps, and why it's deep web itself. It's very important to recognize as deep web, and that is the British and American English. And so you have English on the one side, and Shona and Ndebele, the African languages, the local dialects on the other side. And so I grouped them in a certain way. But having said that, what we look at on the Canoe Zoo Cafe, we look at British English, the United Kingdom, and Great Britain. And that's a lot to take in. But what the Canoe Zoo Cafe is it's the Canoe Zoo Cafe Africa. And so even though we have the United Kingdom and Great Britain on the British English, the Canoe Zoo Cafe itself is an African entity. And it seeks representation through Britain in another sort of way. And the Canoe Zoo Cafe developed from the Librarians Accounting Museum version 1.0, written in 2015 by myself, Jonathan. And so what we looked at is this wordplay. And I highlighted a specific point as the typist needing representation. And so we found a wordplay that would work for the typist as well as the spoken word. And that is where we found the Canoe Zoo. And I developed it from Hastings, is it President or Prime Minister? I think it's President Hastings Kamuzu Banda, the former president of Malawi. And that Kamuzu made me think of Canoe Zoo. I just sort of fitted in the words canoe and zoo because we were talking about Native American people, and we'll come to that later. but that's speak a little French, Native American. But the canoe is a Native American boat, a vessel to travel on water. And because we were thinking of the night sky and doing some stargazing here at Big Tree Harari, myself, Jonathan, I was doing some stargazing. We thought, how can we connect this up to the night sky? And I think that there is an element to the night sky in the zodiac, which comes from the word zoo. If you trace back the Latin and Greek origins of the word zodiac, you'll find a zoo coming through there. And they say it is like the constellations of the night sky, and specifically the constellations of the zodiac, form a kind of zoo in which animals are kept. And it's not entirely true, because you have human beings like the water bearer that are actually human rather than animal. But overall, you have Aries the ram and Taurus the bull. You have various aspects to the zodiacal signs where there is a sense of a zoo. And we can always look up the word zoo and see what it actually means. But I thought through that and the need to have some sort of a ship in the night sky, in the same way that a mariner travels the oceans, a canoeist would travel over bodies of water in ancient America, where canoes, I believe, found their origin. But we thought of canoeing the night sky. And so you would have this aspect to canoeing through the zodiac, canoeing through the zoo of the night sky, the 88 constellations of the night sky forming a kind of a zoo. And so we had an origin to the Canoe Zoo Cafe, and that was Burning Frog Island, Vietnam. Let me say that again, Mr. President. Burning Frog Island, Vietnam. U.S. soldier. Anyway, that gives you an introduction. And we'll come later to Burning Frog. But Burning Frog Island, Vietnam developed into the Canoe Zoo Cafe. The frog made me think of a zoo, and the whole idea of it was moved from an island, a geographical spot on planet Earth, to a metaphorical cafe or flag or smoke signal. That's what the cafe kind of means. It's like a smoke signal. And so you have the Canoe Zoo Cafe, which is not an actual formal place to eat, but a metaphor for a meal, a metaphor for the night sky, a metaphor for a vehicle. So that's the Canoe Zoo Cafe. And the Canoe Zoo Cafe on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. This is a lot of information to take in. Take it slowly, and we'll see how we go. Libra Balances the Books is my publisher, and we talk about American English. I just get my phone up and running here. Ah, there we go. And we have the USA, the United States, and America. Libra Balances the Books, which is just Libra Balances on Twitter. Yeah. So, Libra Balances the Books is my publisher. And I associate, like I mentioned, we came to Facebook via family members. And like I said, we have different levels or layers of story going on here. The Kanuzu Cafe is also what I call my mother's kitchen at the White House, at Big Tree Harare. The main house, what do we say, on the southern end of the pan at Big Tree Harare, we decided to call the White House because it's painted white. Anyway, you have various rooms in the White House, and these profiles I'm talking about are actually catalogued in my book as rooms or runes of the White House. And we're talking about the White House at Big Tree Harare, not the White House in Washington, D.C. So they're very different, but they have the strength of the name behind them. So that gives you an idea. And the Kanuzu Cafe, I call both the kitchen at NASA at Big Tree Harare and the kitchen at the White House at Big Tree Harare. I kind of call the Kanuzu Cafe. So there's a mixture of a restaurant and a home kitchen going on here. Because we have so many people coming through here, and they all want a glass of water or a cup of tea or whatever it is that people need to keep going through their day. So there is an aspect to the Kanuzu Cafe that is real. There's a real aspect to it. It is a real functioning kitchen. But it's different from a cafe because we also do stargazing, and we try and represent the fauna and flora through the Big Tree metaphor, Big Tree Harare, and all that. We'll come to Big Tree Harare. Libra balances the books, the USA, United States, and America, whichever term you prefer to use. American English. Howdy, soldier. And so, Libra balances the books is my publisher. I created it from scratch, and we publish books on Amazon.com and various websites on the internet. So, Libra balances the books is trying to portray ideas that are missing from the general information available to the world. So we're trying to look at anything from spiritual issues to political affairs to a collective. Libra balances the books, we look at as a collective of like minds that are trying to gain access to information in the deep web. Excuse me. So Libra balances the books is my publisher, and we talk about American English because we have the White House and at Big Tree Harare, and we needed some sort of a place to put America, being in Africa, deepest, darkest Africa, to coin a phrase. And the Libra balances the books produced my various books that I've published on Amazon and elsewhere on the internet over the last 5 years, 5 or 6 years. And we have a small following, and we're happy with the small following. I have to do all the admin myself, and so we have a metaphorical following, if you like. Libra is a constellation of the night sky and also a sun sign of the zodiac. And that's where it works with the Kanuzu Cafe and the metaphor of the zodiac to bridge the gap between British English and American English. And we have a kind of a representation of family, because my sister and my mother are both Librans, and they were born under the sign of Libra. And so I've had a lot of exposure to Librans during my life, because we're a close family, we get on with each other, we work towards common goals, and so on and so forth. That's where the Libra comes in. The Balances the Books represents my father, who was a chartered accountant. And so he's passed away, sadly, in 2020. But his spirit continues through Libra Balances the Books. We are accounting for a library. And you can hear the wordplay on Libran and library. It is, and books in the library, and balancing the books. And what we were trying to figure out how to do was, A, how to account for the religious texts of the world, and how to account for the political texts of the world. Those two main groupings of literature were our focus. And that's where we have the collective Libra Balances, the books, trying to account. And that's where the Librarian's Accounting Museum version 1.0 was proudly presented, and is proudly presented, by Libra Balances the Books, American English. So, next, we have Dr. Of. Dr. Of, or Dr. OF, depends on what you're trying to think through. If it's a verbal representation, we talk about Dr. Of. If it's a typed or written representation, we talk about Dr. OF. And that's a lowercase d, lowercase r, space, uppercase O, uppercase F, Dr. Of, Dr. OF. Dr. OF, or Dr. Of, Dr. Of the Third on Twitter, is a carry-all for my medical records on the one hand, and a covert operation of the Central Intelligence Agency on the other, going back through the Obama administration, through the Trump administration. It is a very complex and unrecognized covert operation. And so what it was, in actual fact, is I just had to sit down and write everything that came to mind and put it in files and folders on my computer. That was back in the beginning of 2016. And what happened is that I mulled over what I'd written down for a few years before I eventually, during the Trump administration, uploaded the document via POTUS, the President of the United States, to the internet. And it has subsequently found its way into Somewhere in Africa, my Bible of a book. And so you can read on Amazon.com Dr. Of in its entirety through Somewhere in Africa, the Somewhere Africa Twitter profile. Libra Balances the Books proudly presents Somewhere in Africa. So that's Dr. Of. And Dr. Ov is aimed at an adult audience. It must be noted that it contains swear words and it looks and gets ugly at times. And that is why we decided to have an age restriction or an age guidance on that document. For your information, FYI CIA. So that's Dr. Ov, and I go through it painstakingly, trying to mine it for data. And the Central Intelligence Agency, if they look through the story of the Deepweb1 profiles, they will see that it is guided by that factual, or so-called, in inverted commas, factual document that I've written. And Dr. Ov is part of that. And what we looked at on Dr. Ov primarily was the Republicans and Democrats as represented by the Obama administration and the Trump administration. So that's Dr. Ov. You can guide yourself through that document. If you think about the Democrats and Obama and the Republicans and Trump, you will see where we were at with that covert operation of the Central Intelligence Agency. Anyhow, it starts to get interesting. The next profile we look at is the blog, the online blog of Jonathan N. Wakeling, In Tune with the Universe. And it's my little piece of freedom on the internet, where I get to say what I want to say, when I want to say it. In Tune with the Universe, it's got this statue of a Buddha as its profile picture. A kind of idea. I've always been into Zen and Zen Buddhism and Native American mythology and spirituality and all that kind of thing, the spiritual side of it and the psychotherapy that I've done over the years. That's why I call myself a psychologist, alongside being an artist and writer. The psychology of spirituality, if you like. The human being, as represented by the human heart and the human mind, and a combination of both. So it's a blog. You can look it up and see what I'm actually trying to say in reality. The blog of Jonathan N. Wakeling, In Tune with the Universe. In Tune Forever on Twitter. So there we have it. We've got part of the way through. The next profile we look at is Jonathan N. Wakeling himself, myself, Jonathan, aka Speak a Little French. So what I've said here is we've got Shona and Ndebele, and what we're looking at there is Zimbabwe. That's where you can fit in your big tree Harari, is through Jonathan N. Wakeling. Think about Shona and Ndebele, Zimbabwe. What's missing? That's the piece of the puzzle that was always missing. And that's why we had to go to such great lengths to find the piece of the puzzle. Shona and Ndebele, Nezuro Nasi Mangwana. Nezuro Nasi Mangwana. Nezuro Nasi Mangwana. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Those are some words from Shona for you to look up. And I don't have any mental record of Ndebele words, but I added Ndebele in there anyway, because it's what we're trying to look at in Zimbabwe, is we have Shona and Ndebele. It's spoken more commonly in the Bulawayo area, and we could think of Little Tree Bulawayo, but more often we think of the place of kings in Bulawayo. And Kwamambo. So that could be an Ndebele word for you, Kwamambo, the place of kings. So that's Jonathan in Wakeling, and I came to Zimbabwe with my family from Calgary, Canada, when I was just 2 years old, and I've lived in Zimbabwe since I was 2 years old back in 1992. I'm on the verge of my 41st birthday, and I'm still here. And if I wasn't, we wouldn't have the information. So there you have it. Next up is Speak a Little French. Speak a Little FR on Twitter. I talk about Twitter because we do the Twitter handles because they're all fully public. You don't have to have an account with Twitter in order to access the tweets. So that's why I prefer skipping a Facebook page, because you often need a Facebook account to access a Facebook page properly. Whereas with Twitter, you can just access the tweets whether you've got an account or not. So that's the reasoning behind that. And Instagram is somewhere in between. Yeah. Speak a Little French is my Native American name. I'm a Caucasian, or as people like to say, European, without touching on racism. We look at hodgemonious, how do you say it? Hodgepodge, harmonious, a bridge between being a white man and being a black man. And in between, you have an Indian, whether it's an Asian Indian or whether it's an American Indian. There is an Indian in between. Of course, we can talk to China on that matter, or Japan for that matter. But anyway, we just thought, let's go for an American Indian on that, because I've got an interest. I was born in Calgary, and I have an interest in First Nations or Native American affairs because of where I was born. And you can think about everything that I've said in terms of the birthplace of Jonathan, Calgary, Canada. Calgary, Alberta, Canada. So, having said that, Speak a Little French is representing myself as a white man in a Native American community. It's almost like the rap artist Eminem is like a black man with a white skin. You kind of get the idea. I don't know how true that is, but it's not a very kind example, but it is an example. And so that's why I Speak a Little French is my Native American name. I get to portray myself, and the reason being is because French was the second language of Canada to English. In Canada, they speak both French and English, just as in Zimbabwe we speak Shona and Ndebele. So there is that kind of a French kind of representation in Canada that I wanted to focus on. And it's almost like I'm saying to the Native American, I'm one of you guys. I'm French. And it gets through to them, and they understand what you're trying to say as a metaphorical Frenchman from a British English perspective. Kamuzu Cafe, Kamuzu Banda. Anyhow, here we are. Speak a Little French. And what we have is Speak a Little French, Native American languages, Vietnamese, and African languages. Speak a Little French, we say, went through Vietnam, he came to Africa, and he went through Native America. So, that is where we had Speak a Little French with Vietnamese, African languages, and Native American languages to try and represent everyone. It gives a hold all on the language front for anyone. So where we've got Shona and Ndebele, we've got African languages. Where we've got Native American, we've got French and English, or American English. And so we're trying to fit these pieces of the puzzle. And that's what you can think of on Dr. Of, is pieces of the puzzle being fitted into a grand jigsaw of the universe. And we'll come through that with the Laniakea Inky Blue later. The night sky. Anyhow, speak a little French. And the next on the Deepweb1 menu is Big Tree Harari, and it is the most complex one. Just to give you an introduction, the 11 Lyndhurst Road, which is my mother's home, where I live as her son, I named Big Tree Harari as an online profile, and it's not necessarily meant to replace the physical address, as it is meant to create a representation for people living on the property on the internet, which we have access to at Big Tree Harari. So anyway, I set up a kind of metaphorical internet, and that's where you get the White House. It's a metaphor for the White House, the white, in inverted commas, house. So you can think of a metaphor or an idea, and that's what Big Tree Harari is. And Big Tree Harari is named after a baobab tree, which is a very strange looking tree we get in Africa. And there is a particularly large specimen near Victoria Falls in northwestern Zimbabwe, and they call it Big Tree. That baobab is known as Big Tree. And so we thought through it, and we thought we need a representation of some kind. And I say representation so often because it's true. We do need more representation as people and as a culture and as humanity. Anyhow, Big Tree found its way to Harari, and we decided to represent that one tree in Big Tree Harari. And there are various reasons, from family members being interested in the sciences and to a cultural idea being represented, and the internet at Big Tree Harari being thought of as a big tree. So the Deepweb1 profiles are like a tree. That's what's the vital aspect to trying to understand the deep web, is the internet can be thought of as spider's web, or a fishing net, or a cage, or a tree. And a baobab represents it so beautifully. It is an unusual specimen of nature. Big Tree Harari. In Shona, they say Muti Mahombe Harari. Big Tree Harari. Muti Mahombe Harari. And we have a map. You can look at it on our online profiles. We have a map that I created to try and get the metaphorical internet going. And it's got things like a panhandle where the driveway is, being called Idaho, or Panhandle, to the White House, as mentioned. And here, where we are recording this video, at NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration at Big Tree Harari. This is where I live. And I stay at NASA because my domain is the night sky. And I need my NASA on that situation. Otherwise, I might get taken out. Someone might want my head. So I have my NASA. You never know. You don't want to get into a fight with the scorpion. The scorpion doesn't think twice about stinging you. Be careful in Africa. So that's Big Tree Harari. And it's a beautiful Zimbabwean homestead. What used to be a Rhodesian homestead. It's got much history in the country because it's an old house. And we have various activities from conservation of nature, and what we focus on Big Tree is two important things. One is the environmental concerns, and two is the Zimbabwean community. So we're doing this for the social, the greater good, the greater social good. That is why we do Big Tree Harare, for the greater social good. Environmental concerns and the Zimbabwean community. If you find yourself in either of those two boxes, you're in the right place. By appointment only. The next one and the final one of the first series is Somewhere in Africa, which we touched on. Somewhere in Africa, and it's a wordplay. So sun as in the sun in the daytime sky, and some as in some coins, the sun in the daytime sky. So that is what somewhere does. It's somewhere in Africa. Somewhere in Africa. It is a very good identification of the crux, the crux alpha, where you have a pivot or a fulcrum. And that's what Somewhere in Africa does for us, is it creates a hold-all for the much more difficult material of Dr. Ov and Librarian's Accounting Museum mentioned earlier. So it's a very similar thing it does to the Kanuzu Cafe and Hastings Kamuzu Banda and a kazoo, which is a musical instrument of some kind. Look it up. Somewhere in Africa on Amazon.com. So, Somewhere in Africa, we look at Portuguese and Brazilian Portuguese, Mozambique, Angola, Brazil, and Portugal. Mozambique, Angola, Brazil, and Portugal. We look at why there is more Portuguese in Africa and South America, and how the colonies came to be formed. So there's all that going on. The profile picture of Somewhere in Africa is a map of Africa. So we're looking at the complexity with being somewhere on that map, and we don't know where we are. We just landed in Zimbabwe because that's where we happen to be. But we could have been anywhere in Africa. So who knows? And why we looked at the Portuguese is because we looked at the conversation with Native America, and Native Americans can also be thought of, if you use it as a very general term, Native Americans can be thought of as South Americans as well, Central Americans. There is a complexity there, and that's where the Brazil helps us and also stabilizes us with Africa. If you've got your South America, you will survive. If you don't have your South America, you won't survive. That's how to handle Africa. Best that you don't try in the first place. Have a good read, Somewhere in Africa. Come visit us in Africa. The next profile, which is one of the second series of profiles, which is 3 profiles, is the Laniakia Inky Blue. Laniakia Inky Blue on Twitter. And it is very interesting. The language of science and the language of mysticism, the night sky and stargazing, Laniakea supercluster. The Laniakea supercluster is what came out of the naming of the local group of galaxies. The local group of galaxies was known as the Virgo supercluster, and what they called astronomers, physicists, cosmologists, they found that there was a much bigger collection of galaxies that the Virgo supercluster was just a part of, called the Laniakea supercluster. So it's a new term that's coming to us from science, is the Laniakea supercluster. And the Laniakea is Laniakea, I should say. It's actually Laniakea. Laniakea. You say tomato, I say tomato. The Laniakea supercluster is, the Laniakea in Hawaiian means immense heaven. And that is why they called it that, because of its translation in Hawaiian. And it's a beautiful word in itself. And when you look up at the night sky, you are looking at the Laniakea supercluster. So that's why I called it the Laniakea inky blue, because it brings together both ideas and sort of marries the whole equation. And so you've got the Kanuzu, and you've got Libra, and all these kind of things. And the language of the night sky and stargazing, that's what you have to do, is you have to create points of interest. And I love the term the inky blue for the night sky. I always call it the inky blue because it's such a beautiful metaphor for the night sky. And Laniakea is like the cherry on the top of the cake on that night sky. It's bigger than any one of us can ever imagine. We can have a picture of it and never quite grasp how big it is. It's very big. Maybe need a big tree on that. So that's the Laniakea inky blue. And with that, you get backyard astronomy with Jonathan N. Wakeling. And that's why I'm at NASA here at Big Tree Harari, is because I needed my stable point when I go stargazing. I don't want to get lost out there. It's a long way home to planet Earth. I've been out there and I know what it's like. Burning Frog Island we've talked about in terms of what it's the results that it caused, which is the Kanuzu Cafe. Burning Frog Island is next of the second series, and it is Burning Frog Island, Vietnam. What we say here is the language of spirit, the language of community, and the language of Mother Earth, Vietnam. So it specifically tries to represent Vietnam in the equation and give some solid ground for the Vietnamese of the world. And of course, the Vietnam War. Howdy, US soldier. And we thought of an idyllic island in Asia, an idyllic place like an El Dorado or Shambhala, yeah, El Dorado, the eternal fountain of youth, that kind of thing. The endless riches that will bring you. And that's what Burning Frog Island is it's a community of people living in harmony with nature on an island in Vietnam. And it is trying to think through, what have we come through with the Vietnam War? Where have we been with the Vietnam War? And where are we moving towards in the modern day? And it also comes from doing all these trance music festivals during my youth, and having that sort of community where huge numbers of people got together in a community for a few days and coexisted. Bit of a cough. I don't think it's COVID. I do smoke cigarettes, but bit of a cough. Excuse me. So that is Burning Frog Island, and I also call it Burning Frog Island because Big Tree Harari is a bit of a Burning Frog Island in terms of wandering around the garden here. You've got to be very careful you don't stand on a guttural toad, which is the common toad around here in the gardens. And I have little frogs that in the summer they come hopping in, tree frogs come hopping into to NASA here at Big Tree Harari through the door. And you've got to be careful if you want to make sure they survive. You've got to take them out and carefully put them in the garden again. That's where I kind of call this whole situation Burning Frog. It's and on top of that, I'll let you into a little secret. The burning came through a pop music singer called female vocalist Ellie Goulding, British pop music singer, and she wrote a song called Burn. And the YouTube video, if you get to see it, has an amazing sense of that Burning Frog Island community, people getting together to coexist. And another little trick on that is Taylor Swift. I called the panhandle here at Big Tree Harari Cornelia Street. When is it the Lover album? I think, yeah, came out, and we were talking through Idaho at the panhandle at Big Tree Harari. I'll never walk Cornelia Street again, but because I walk it so regularly that I know it just fitted with that song. And so I called it Cornelia Street in honor of Taylor Swift's part in history, in the modern world, in the millennial world, post-millennial Taylor Swift universe. So there's Ellie Goulding and her song Burn, and I thought through the song our theme tune for Burning Frog Island would be her song, How Long Will I Love You? Something like that. Yeah. How Long Will I Love You? Burning Frog Island, Vietnam, American English. Lastly, of the second series of the Deepweb1 Profiles, there's 3 of them, is Twasium Little Girl and Ento 9. And this is a very wonderful one to have. We went the furthest for Twasium Little Girl and Ento 9. They are mere figments of my imagination. It's a kind of computer game I play. It's very complex. I'm going to pause the video and have a cigarette, and when I come back, we'll talk through Twasium Little Girl and Ento 9, and finally Picasso 3. So after a short break, I'm back. Jonathan in Wakeling, aka Speak a Little French, aka Makanaka, aka Picasso 3, clocking in here from Big Tree Harari for the final segment of this video. Twasium Little Girl and Ento 9. We went the furthest for the starter. The superhero Twasium Little Girl and Commander-in-Chief Ento 9. Fair Maid of Ireland, Twasium Little Girl, and Ball of Wildfire Ento 9. We look at, with this profile, Twice Little Girl and Into 9, we look at the language of gaming, the language of war, the language of competition and survival, the language of Shakespeare and drama. And we have a Middle-earth on that from the Middle-earth of J.R.R. Tolkien. So, what are we talking about here? Well, it's very interesting. The Ent is a friend of Treebeard. If you've read The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien, you'll know Treebeard the Ent of Entwood. And Enter 9 is developed from the opening poem of that book, that trilogy, The Lord of the Rings. Nine rings for mortal men doomed to die in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. So we got a 09 on that because of 9/11. We hacked away at the 11 on Lyndhurst Road and we backed it up with our Enter 9. And so we avoided the politic of 9/11. That is possibly the most difficult piece of information we came back with. 11 Lyndhurst Road became Big Tree Harari, and 9 became Enter 9. Put a 0 in front of it. See how you do. 9/11. So there. Anyway, on the other side, you divide 9 by 3 and you get 3. 3 by 3 equals 9. Toi, un, deux, trois. Parlez-vous le français? Do you speak French? 1, 2, 3. Un, deux, trois. That is where we get the toi of troisième little girl. Troisième means third, compared to trois, which is 3 in the French. And so troisième is a French word, and we marry it with little girl. And we take you back to the Second World War. So we've been through Vietnam, we're going back to the Second World War. And the little girl of Troisième Little Girl is a play on words with little boy. The bomb, the name of the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima at the closure of the Second World War. The bomb that was dropped on Nagasaki was called Fat Man. So you had Little Boy, Hiroshima, and Fat Man, Nagasaki. Anyway, we thought through it long and hard. And we came up with Troisième Little Girl through Deuxième Bureau, which is the French Secret Service to this day. Deuxième Bureau. So we had a toi and a little boy. And we thought through it long and hard, and we came up with Troisième Little Girl out of that mess. And we avoided Nagasaki altogether. Fat man, have a McDonald's. So, jokes aside, Troisième Little Girl became a co-author, an imaginary co-author, and Enter 9 became another imaginary co-author of the Libre Balances the books. From the Librarian's Accounting Museum version 1.0 to Dr. Of to Somewhere in Africa. Troisième Little Girl, author number 1, Enter 9, author number 2. So you can play a computer game based on that. Do you want to be one author or the other author, or do you want to write as yourself, Jonathan? Do I want to write as Jonathan in Wakeling, or do I want to write as Troisième or enter 9? So there you have it. Play a bit of a computer game with that. When you log into your computer game, whatever computer game it happens to be, for example, StarCraft, I call myself Enter 9 because I like to be a commander-in-chief in that situation. In other computer games, like a hidden object game like Nevertales, I sometimes want to be a girl, and so I choose to be Troisième little girl in that situation. But when you are writing a book, it is good to have a pseudonym to think through, even if you never end up using the pseudonym, the nom de plume, to quote the French. So Troisième little girl is one nom de plume, and Enter 9 is another nom de plume for my written work. And if you read my books, you will know what we are talking about in that situation. So that's the Troisième little girl and Enter 9 profile, and yippee! We are at the last profile, and that is Picasso 3. Picasso 3 is a separate endeavor to the Deepweb1 profiles. Picasso 3 is my pièce de résistance, to quote the French again. So, Picasso 3. We've been through English in the Canuto Cafe and Libre Balances, the books. We've been through Portuguese in somewhere in Africa, and now we get some Spanish, having been through French in Speak a Little French. So, Spanish, there's not so much Spanish in Africa. There is more Spanish in South America, yet we have Portuguese. This is an interesting point to make about the colonies, how it came to be. Like we say in Africa, just so stories, how the elephant got its trunk, how the ostrich got its neck, and so on and so forth. Picasso 3 is trying to represent me in the fine arts in one way, because I'm an artist, psychologist, and writer. We've talked a lot about the writing and a bit about psychology through this video, and we want to look at the arts because I'm a fine artist as well. I do psycho art and written art and all that kind of thing. And I'm a musician, and I'm an actor. And this whole video has been an act for me. And Picasso 3 looks at, it's almost like saying Picasso the Third. That's why we've got Dr. Ov a Third to think through that on Picasso the Third. So you've got a mixture of Picasso the Third and Picasso 3. And again, it's a Troisième little girl divided by 3, 9 divided by 3, enter 9, all that kind of thing. And the 3 is very fundamental. You're always dividing into 3s on the page with art when you've got the top, middle, and bottom of the page in a landscape. You try and fit in a portrait into the right scale of the page. And that's where the law of 3s comes into the fine arts. It's one of the first lessons you learn in art school. Even though I've never been to art school, I'm a self-taught artist. And I had to think through how I would represent myself if I was Picasso the Third. And the other, what comes into the law of the 3s is the triptych and the diptych. 2 paintings making a triptych, diptych rather, 3 paintings making a triptych. So you had the law of threes and a triptych, and there was something else I've forgotten now. How memory fades. Yeah, I can't remember. There was another point about the three in the fine arts. It'll come to me later. Anyway, Picasso 3, a Spanish artist who painted in Paris. And Picasso 3 is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. It is independent of the Deepweb1 Profiles. It is the alternative and includes all of them at once. It is the hold-all for Jonathan and his endeavors in life. The long story of the short novel. The Long Walk. So there we have it. The Deepweb1 Profiles by Jonathan N. Wakeling. Online at long, long last. Clocking off here from NASA at Big Tree Harare. Myself, Jonathan. Good day. Mr. President, sir.